Hallo, ich bin's, Robin, Deutschlehrer mit Core Languages, and today I'm back on campus of the beautiful College of Charleston, and I have a question for you. Think of the last time you gave someone a present or a gift. What was it? Now, some of you may say, well, I gave my friend a birthday present, or I gave my partner flowers. Well, when you give someone something, then that someone is the indirect object of a sentence. Now, think of the last time you gave yourself something. For example, you could say, I gave myself some time to complete the project. Well, in that example, you are the subject of the sentence, but you're also the indirect object of the sentence, and you're using a reflexive verb. In German, in this example, you would use a reflexive verb that triggers the dative case. So you have to be aware of how they change the pronouns in the sentence. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to use reflexive verbs with the dative case so that you can incorporate them into your German sentences. I would say, los geht's und viel Spaß beim Deutschlernen.
Reflexive verbs in the dative case. When the subject and the object in a sentence are the same, the verb is reflexive and the sentence requires a reflexive pronoun. In English, we say myself or yourself. If the subject and the indirect object are the same, then the reflexive pronoun is in the dative case. The subject and the indirect object aren't always the same, and when they're not, we simply use the regular dative case pronouns, which are mir, dir, ihnen, ihm, ihr, ihm, uns, euch, ihnen, and ihnen. Now watch what happens when the subject and the indirect object are the same. Mir, dir, sich, sich, uns, euch, sich, and sich. Let's look at two sentences side by side, one where the subject and the indirect object are not the same, and one where they are. Here's the example of the subject and indirect object that are not the same. Ich kämme ihm die Haare. I could translate the sentence and say, I comb the hair for him. In this example, ich is the subject, ihm is the indirect object, and die Haare is the direct object. Now watch what happens in the reflexive sentence. Kämmt sich die Haare. The literal translation would be, he combs the hair for himself. Is the subject, sich is the indirect object, die Haare is the direct object, and the subject and the indirect object are the same person. In a sentence, the dative reflexive pronoun usually comes before the accusative object or the direct object. And sometimes the accusative object only implies to a part of the body. For example, the face, the hair, the hands, etc. I could say, I wash the hands, I comb the hair. In a sentence, we would start with the subject, then the reflexive verb, followed by the dative reflexive pronoun, and then the accusative object. For example, ich ziehe mir den Pulli an. I put the sweater on for myself. Wir putzen uns die Zähne. We brush the teeth for ourselves, or we brush ourselves the teeth. Rasiert sich das Gesicht. He shaves himself the face. There are several verbs in German that come with a reflexive dative pronoun. Notice how many of them in English will have the translation something, do something for oneself. Feel free to repeat after me. Sich etwas anziehen. To put something on. Sich etwas brechen. To break something. Sich die Haare bürsten. To brush one's hair. Sich die Haare kämmen. To comb one's hair. Sich etwas kaufen. To buy oneself something. Sich etwas kochen. To cook oneself something. Sich die Zähne putzen. To brush one's teeth. Sich das Gesicht rasieren. To shave one's face. Sich etwas vorstellen. To imagine something. Sich die Hände waschen. To wash one's hands. Like all other verbs, reflexive verbs occur in the second position in the present tense, but the reflexive pronoun immediately follows it. For example, ich wasche mir die Hände. I wash myself the hands. In a question beginning with the verb, the subject goes into second position, followed by the reflexive pronoun. For example, wäschst du dir die Hände? Wash you yourself the hands, or do you wash yourself the hands? Here are some Beispiele with the dative reflexive verb sich etwas anziehen, to put on something for oneself. To help you break it down, sich is the indirect object or the indirect object pronoun. The etwas is the direct object, and the following examples will be articles of clothing. For example, der Hut, the hat. Ich ziehe mir den Hut an. I put myself the hat on, or I put on the hat for myself. Mir is the indirect object reflexive pronoun, and den Hut is the direct object. Die Jacke, the jacket. Zieh dir die Jacke an. Put yourself the jacket on, or put the jacket on for yourself. Die Jeans, or the jeans. Du ziehst dir die Jeans an. You put yourself the jeans on, or you're putting on the jeans for yourself. Die Schuhe, the shoes. Zieht sich die Schuhe an. He puts himself the shoes on, or he puts on the shoes for himself. Here are some more Beispiele of reflexive dative verbs. Read along with the sentences and pay close attention to the reflexive dative pronoun. For example, sich etwas vorstellen, to imagine something for oneself or to oneself. Ich stelle mir vor, dass ich Astronaut bin. I'm imagining to myself that I am an astronaut. Sich etwas wünschen, to wish something for oneself. Du wünschst dir Berühmtheit. You wish for yourself fame, or you wish fame for yourself. Sich etwas brechen, to break something. Sie hat sich den Arm gebrochen. She has broken the arm for herself. She has broken herself the arm. Sich etwas kaufen, to buy something for oneself. Kaufst du dir die Schuhe? Are you buying yourself the shoes? Let's practice. Üben wir. Look at the following two pictures and sentences. Identify the subject and add the corresponding reflexive dative pronoun. Kochst du etwas zum Abendessen? The subject is du, and the dative reflexive pronoun for du ist dir. Kochst du dir etwas zum Abendessen? Are you cooking yourself something for dinner? Ich habe den Mantel ausgezogen. The subject is ich, and the dative reflexive pronoun is mir. Ich habe mir den Mantel ausgezogen. I've taken myself off the coat, or I've taken the coat off for myself. And how about these two examples? Choose the correct dative reflexive pronoun for formal you in the singular. Haben Sie die Haare gebürstet? The correct reflexive pronoun in the dative case is sich. Haben Sie sich die Haare gebürstet? Have you, sir, or have you, ma'am, brushed yourself the hair? And how about this example? Try to find the dative reflexive pronoun for informal you in the plural. Bitte wascht die Hände. The correct sentence is Bitte wascht euch die Hände. Please wash the hands for yourselves. And how about these two examples? Sie putzt die Zähne. Sie in this example is she, which you can tell by the conjugation of the verb putzt. The correct reflexive pronoun in the dative case is sich. Sie putzt sich die Zähne. She brushes herself the teeth, or she brushes the teeth for herself. And how about this example? Ich habe einen Film angesehen. Ich is the subject, so the correct reflexive pronoun in the dative case is mir. Ich habe mir einen Film angesehen. I have for myself a movie watched, or I have watched a movie for myself.
Vielen Dank fürs Zusehen. I hope you now have a better understanding of how to use reflexive dative verbs. As always, if you have more questions, feel free to comment, or if you're interested in joining one of our German courses with a live instructor, feel free to message us directly. Das war's, vielen Dank und bis zum nächsten Mal.